"There's a dog on that roof." That was the first thing I said, barely above a whisper, when I saw him for the first time. Perched, like some forgotten statue, a small, soaking mass of golden fur sat against the dull grey shingles, unmoving. The flood had swallowed Hollow Creek for 3 days straight. Water had crept over curbs, surged into kitchens, swallowed up backyards until the neighborhood had become a swamp. Most of the folks were evacuated or long since driven out, but I had stayed behind. Stubbornness, mostly, or maybe it was the idea of leaving behind a home that had already lost so much of itself. My name is Ruthie Palmer, 67 years old, retired nurse, and I've lived in this town for as long as I can remember. My house sits on slightly higher ground, just a foot or two that made the difference between devastation and stubborn resistance. I'd barricaded the porch with sandbags, prayed as the waters rose, and checked the street every hour. That's when I saw him. 2 houses down, on top of the Jenkins place, crouched low but alert. A dog, not barking, not pacing, just there. His golden coat was drenched, clinging tight to his thin frame, and even from a distance, I could tell he was underfed. He looked like a mop left out in the rain. But there was something about the way he was sitting, upright, still, like he was waiting for something or someone. I stood at the edge of my porch, ankle deep in water, unsure if what I was seeing was real. The sky was a heavy bruise, low and silent except for the occasional roll of thunder. The water between us was deep 5 feet. Maybe Mirand I knew better than to wade through it. There were snakes in there, maybe worse. The National Guard had passed through that morning, calling out with megaphones from flat-bottomed boats, offering to evacuate anyone still stuck. I'd told them I was fine, but now, staring at this dog, I wasn't so sure. I rushed inside, heart pounding, and rummaged through the kitchen drawer until I found the old pair of binoculars Jack used to keep for birds. I hadn't touched them in years. The lenses were a little cloudy, but when I raised them to my eyes, the image came into sharp focus. His eyes locked on mine, even from across the street. Wide, focused. Not wild, not panicked, just waiting. I'd seen that look before back in the ER, sitting beside patients who knew something had gone terribly wrong but were too quiet to say so. I picked up the emergency radio and called the line they'd given us. "There's a dog stranded on the Jenkins roof," I said. 42 Oakley Street. They logged it, said they'd make a note. But I heard the tone in that dispatcher's voice, thin, tired, like she was already moving on to the next report. They weren't coming. That night, the storm ramped up again. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the window panes, and sheets of rain pelted the siding like thrown gravel. I slept on the couch with the flashlight clutched to my chest, the radio murmuring in the background, and every time lightning lit up the room, I craned my neck to see if he was still there. He always was. Unmoving, unbarking, just waiting by morning. The rain had turned to drizzle, and a strange stillness settled over the street. I stepped out onto the porch and made a decision that felt both foolish and necessary. Under the porch was an old canoe, dusty and webbed with cobwebs. I dragged it out with stiff arms, brushing off pine needles and checking the bottom for leaks. It hadn't touched water in over a decade, but the fiberglass still held. I grabbed the paddle, tied my flashlight to my belt, and slid the canoe into the street. My hands shook as I pushed off. The water lapped at the edges, a slow-motion current moving between familiar houses now unrecognizable. Mailboxes peeked out, like lost periscopes. Stop signs became reeds. I paddled in silence, passing darkened windows and sagging roofs. The world had gone quiet in that eerie post-storm way, like everything was holding its breath. It took me 20 minutes to reach the Jenkins place. When I got close, I stopped paddling and let the canoe drift forward. The dog stood, just like that. No bark, no growl. He stood, slow and stiff, and moved toward the edge of the roof. I spoke gently. "Hey there," I called, voice cracking. With age and adrenaline, "It's okay. I'm here." He tilted his head slightly, but didn't move closer. Then he looked past me, out over the water, like he was still waiting for someone else to appear. I followed his gaze, but there was nothing there. Just water and silence. Then I saw Ida leash still clipped to his collar, frayed and trailing. Behind him, it had snagged on a branch near the gutter. My throat tightened. I secured the canoe to a nearby drainpipe and pulled a ladder from inside it. Each rung groaned under my weight as I climbed. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched me. His paws were wry, could see now. He'd been pacing, again and again, waiting. The roof was slick, but I moved slow, talking softly with every step. "I'm not gonna hurt you, sweetheart," I murmured. "I'm just here to get you down." He sniffed at the air when I was close, eyes never leaving mine. I reached out, clipped the leash carefully, and waited. He didn't pull away. I guided him to the edge of the roof, rung by rung down the ladder, one paw at a time, whispering comfort the whole way. His body trembled, but he didn't resist. When we reached the canoe, he curled up instantly, nose tucked beneath his tail, as if he had finally been given permission to rest. I pushed us off from the Jenkins house and paddled home, water gently rocking us. He didn't look back. I named him Scout. By the time we made it back to my place, the drizzle had stopped. I dried him off with an old towel, laid out a dish of leftover chicken, and set up a corner of the living room with blankets and a soft rug. He barely ate mossily. He just lay there, eyes fixed on the door, listening, waiting, even now. I don't know what pulled me toward him, what made me paddle out into floodwaters when I'd told the National Guard I was fine. Maybe it was his silence, or maybe it was the way he didn't seem afraid of being alone. Just determined, focused. As if he knew, somewhere out there, someone he loved had been taken, and he was holding his vigil. That night, I sat beside him on the rug while the radio played quietly in the background. I didn't know where he came from. I didn't know who had left him. All I knew was this: he had waited. He had waited on that roof in the storm, in the cold, through thunder and lightning and rising water, and now, he wasn't alone anymore. The first few days with Scout were quiet. He didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't make a sound beyond the soft click of his claws on the hardwood floors. He moved slowly, cautiously, like he didn't want to take up too much space. At night, he curled up at the foot of my bed and stared at the door like he was still waiting for someone to walk through it. He barely touched his food, even though I gave him warm leftovers chicken, rice, a bit of gravy. He sniffed, then turned away. But he never tried to run. Never once. I made some flyers with a photo I'd taken of him by the window, ears alert, eyes wide and gentle. I tacked them up around town where I could still get 2 dry bulletin boards. I posted online in every local group I could find. Lost dog found after the flood. No tags. Golden retriever mix. Mail.com. Quiet. Found near Oakley Street. Contact Ruthie. I didn't expect much. Most people were still trying to piece their lives back together. Some hadn't returned. Some never would. Still, I kept looking. Scout followed me room to room, never underfoot, but never far. When I sat with a book, he'd lie nearby. When I went to the porch, he came to, but always, he kept one eye on the road, like he was waiting for the right car to turn the corner. About 2 weeks after the flood, I was in the yard pulling storm debris from the flower beds when a white pickup pulled to a slow stop at the curb. A tall man stepped out, maybe late 30s, mud on his boots, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am," he said, nodding politely. "FEMA, just checking in. How are you holding up?" I gave him the rundown. Power was spotty, but on roof had held, yard was still a mess. He made a few notes on his form. As he turned to go, Scout rounded the side of the house. The man stopped. "That your dog?" I shook my head. "No. Found him on a roof during the flood, 2 houses down. Nobody's claimed him." The man crouched slowly, watching Scout with curiosity. "He looks like a golden mix. Maybe some shepherd in him." Scout looked back, but didn't approach. He wagged his tail once and stood still. "He's healthy now." "You've done good." I nodded but hesitated. "He's still waiting, I think." The man tilted his head. "Lot of animals got left behind," he said softly. Some folks didn't have time, others had to choose. Some tried to mark their homes, but it's hard. Didn't always work out. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small folded slip of paper. "Try this site," he said, handing it to me. A lost and found registry. Folks can upload photos, cross-check microchips, that kind of thing. I thanked him, and he left with a wave. That evening, I sat on the porch with Scout at my feet. The water had receded now, leaving behind muck and mildew and a faint smell of pine. The sky was pink with the last light of day. "You got someone still looking for you?" I asked. He leaned his head gently against my knee. The next morning, I took his picture again, this time with better light, and uploaded it to the site. I added every detail I could: found during flood, Hollow Creek, golden coat, scar on left ear, .com temperament, answers to Scout. Then, I waited. 3 days later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "I think you found Boomer." I opened it slowly. It was from a woman named Maggie Hart. Her message was short but trembling with emotion. She said her parents lived on Oakley Street. They had both passed during the flood. The water had come fast. Maggie had barely escaped. Her dog, Boomer, had slipped his leash in the chaos as she was being pulled into a rescue boat. She hadn't seen him since she'd assumed the worst. She attached 3 photos. It was him, same soulful eyes, same soft gold coat. The scar on the left ear. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Scout or Boomer was sleeping by the door. I looked at him. He looked up at me. I replied with my number. An hour later, the phone rang. Her voice was shaking. "Is he okay?" "He's more than okay," I said. "He's been waiting." She sobbed. Quiet, breathless tears that carried the weight of everything she'd lost. She told me how her parents had adopted Boomer from a shelter 3 years ago. How he'd been a quiet, loyal dog. Never barked unless he had to. How he'd stayed by her dad's side when her mum went into hospice. She said she didn't know if she could take him back. Her apartment didn't allow dogs. She was between jobs. Things were hard. "You don't have to decide right now," I told her. "He's safe. Take your time." We hung up, and I looked down at him. "Scout Boomer," I said. "Looks like you're home for now." A week later, she came. I was sweeping the porch when the grey sedan pulled into the drive. She stepped out slowly, late 20s, maybe 30. Pale eyes rimmed red, but steady. Scout was in the yard, nose to the ground. The moment he saw her, he barked. The first sound I'd ever heard from him. He ran to her like a child, tail wagging wildly. She knelt, arms open, tears falling before he even reached her. He buried his head into her chest and shook. She held him, fingers tangled in his fur, whispering his name. They stayed like that for a long time. She spent the weekend. We talked for hours about her parents, the flood, the kindness of strangers, about how sometimes the worst moments hide small, stubborn miracles. She said she still couldn't take him back, not yet, but maybe someday. "That's fine," I said. "He's got a home here." Scout stayed, but something shifted. He no longer watched the door with the same weight in his eyes. He played in the yard, chased butterflies, dozed in the sun. Every Sunday, like clockwork, Maggie returned. She brought treats, a new leash, a photo of her parents. We never said the word adoption. We didn't have to. Scout sat by the garden gate each morning, not quite waiting anymore, just watching. His ears twitched with the breeze, his eyes drifting to the road like memory. And when the sun climbed high, he'd pad back to the porch and lie beside my chair, breathing slow and content. I'd look down at him and whisper, "You're doing good, buddy. You're doing real good." The Monday after Maggie's 3rd visit, I noticed something. Scout had stopped sitting by the front door. He still followed me around the house, still curled beside my chair when I read, but the constant watching, the vigil that had once defined him, had softened. Instead, he started lying on the porch, head tilted, ears twitching at the sound of birdsong or distant lawnmowers. He had shifted from waiting for something to simply being part of it all. That change didn't happen all at once. It came like Spring, after a long winter, quiet, steady, and full of small wonders. It was during one of those porch mornings, mug of coffee in my hands, Scout snoozing in the sun, that an idea came to me. He needed a job, not a real one, obviously, but something with purpose, something that made use of that calm, gentle spirit of his. He'd waited so long for someone, for a sign, for a home. Now, maybe he could help others who were waiting. 2. I called the elementary school. They'd reopened a week earlier in the church basement, while the main building underwent repairs. I asked to speak to Miss Connie, the principal. I told her about Scout, about how quiet and steady he was, how he had this way of making people feel seen without doing much at all. A therapy dog? She asked, her voice perking up. We've never had one, but Lord knows these kids could use it. Some of them lost everything, their homes, their pets, their parents. She told me to bring him in that Friday. When the day came, I bathed Scout in the backyard with warm water and lavender shampoo. He tolerated it with patience and a resigned sigh. I brushed his coat until it shone, wiped down his paws, and clipped on the blue collar Maggie had brought the previous week. When we stepped into the church basement classroom, Scout froze for just a moment. It smelled of glue sticks and graham crackers. Rows of desks lined the walls, and the floor was covered with mismatched rugs and beanbags. The ceiling lights flickered, slightly, humming like old fluorescent tubes do. A little girl shrieked and ducked behind her chair. It's okay, I said gently, patting Scout's side. He's friendly. Miss Connie met us by the door, smiling warmly but with eyes that hinted at worry. We'll go slow, she said. No rush. We settled into the reading corner. Scout lay down beside me, tail tucked, nose resting between his front paws. Miss Connie brought over a few kids, cautious and quiet. One boy with a Batman backpack crept forward and touched Scout's ear. Scout didn't move. His name's Scout, I said. The boy smiled and patted him once, then again. Soon the others came closest, full hands brushing his fur, tugging gently at his tail. A girl sat beside him and started reading a picture book aloud, her voice shaking at first, then growing steady. Scout blinked slowly, eyes half closed, completely at peace. By the end of the hour, even the little girl who had screamed earlier was curled beside him, tracing shapes on his leg with her fingertip. Miss Connie stood nearby, arms folded, tears threatening to spill from the corners of her eyes. You're welcome any time, she said. So, we went back. Every Friday, Scout knew the routine. His tail would begin wagging the moment we turned onto the church road. He trotted up the steps like he belonged there. The kids began drawing pictures of him, stick figure renditions of a golden dog with hearts all around him. They'd give them to me with sticky fingers and wide grins. One morning, a quiet boy named Eli leaned in and whispered, I like Scout better than people. I ruffled his hair gently. Me too, I said. After the school visits, we'd swing by the diner. Marlene always gave Scout a piece of bacon and called him the best-looking gentleman this town's ever had. He'd sit beneath my feet while I sipped sweet tea and listened to the hum of conversation. Returning to our recovering town, Maggie kept coming, though less often. Her visits were quieter now, more thoughtful. Sometimes she'd bring cookies, other times, just herself. She talked about job applications, her aunt in the hospital, her sleepless nights. Life was heavy on her shoulders, but she never stayed long enough to unload too much of it. One day, the phone rang while I was folding laundry. Her voice cracked on the other end. Ruthie, I got the job. And an apartment, pet-friendly. It's small, but it's safe. I think I can bring him home. I looked down at Scout, curled on the rug, breathing slow and steady. My heart squeezed when I asked. 2 weeks, she said. I'll come get him then. Congratulations, I told her. I meant it, truly. But I couldn't ignore the knot forming in my chest. The next 2 weeks were strange. I found myself watching Scout more closely, noticing things I hadn't before, the exact way his left ear folded when he tilted his head, the soft groan he made when stretching after a nap, the steady thump of his tail whenever I opened the fridge. I cooked special meals, rice, chicken, a few baby carrots for good measure. He ate politely, gratefully. I let him sleep on the bed. One night, I couldn't sleep. I stepped out onto the porch. Scout followed, lying down beside my chair. "You excited?" I asked, voice barely more. Then a breath. He yawned and rested his head on my foot. "She loves you," I said. "She really does, and you love her too. You waited for her." His tail tapped once. "I just want you to be happy." 2 days before Maggie was due to arrive, we went to the school, like always. The kids were extra energetic. One boy brought in his guinea pig. Scout watched it with mild interest, but didn't move. Miss Connie pulled me aside while the kids played nearby. "I heard Scout might be leaving us soon," she said. "Yes," I replied. "His owner is ready to take him back." She nodded, her expression soft. "We'll miss him, but I'm glad he gets to go home." Home. That word sat heavy. As we left that day, the children handed me a card. They'd made crayon hearts and block letters that read, "We love you, Scout." He carried it in his mouth all the way to the car. I pinned it to the fridge when we got home that night. The phone rang again. It wasn't Maggie. It was a man's voice, a police officer. His tone was careful but firm. There'd been an accident. Rainy highway, a truck had lost control. Maggie was in the hospital alive, but unconscious. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, Scout at my feet. He looked up at me like he knew. "You're not going anywhere just yet," I whispered. And he didn't. The hospital was 3 hours away in Lafayette. I wasn't sure if I should even go. Maggie was in the ICU, unconscious, heavily sedated. The officer on the phone had said I was the closest thing she had to family right now. Her aunt was too, frail to travel, and there wasn't anyone else. The next morning, I left Scout with Marlene at the diner. She loved him, and he loved her bacon. I made the long drive with the windows down, trying to keep my mind from drifting too far in either direction. The hospital smelled like bleach and something sad. I gave my name at the front desk and was led to a quiet waiting room with pastel chairs and magazines that hadn't been touched in weeks. A young doctor came to speak with me, kind eyes, a calm voice. He explained Maggie's injuries, a broken rib, a concussion, bruising in her lungs. She'd wake up eventually. Her recovery would be slow, but likely full. "She's lucky," he said. "Her seatbelt saved her life." I nodded, holding that small truth like it was made of glass. When I peeked into her room, I stayed only a minute. Machines beeped in gentle rhythm. Her face was pale. Her hands still leaned in and whispered, "Scout's okay. He's waiting." By the time I got back to Hollow Creek, it was late afternoon. The sky had turned a golden pink. Scout was sitting by the screen door of the diner, tail wagging, slow and steady. When he saw me, he stood up and patted over, brushing his nose against my coat. I crouched beside him. "She's going to be okay," I told him, "but it'll be a while." He huffed gently and leaned his head into my chest. The days that followed moved like honey. I kept busy sweeping the porch, tending the flower beds, checking in on neighbors. Marlene dropped off casseroles wrapped in foil. Miss Connie called to ask about Maggie. The kids at the school sent a get well card shaped like a sunflower, each petal with a smiling face drawn in crayon. Scout stayed close during all of it, never far from my side. He followed me to the mailbox, sat at my feet when I sipped coffee. He didn't watch the door anymore, not like before. It was as if he knew. That waiting didn't mean staring, it meant staying. On the 5th day, Maggie woke up. The nurse called me early in the morning. "She's asking for you," she said. I didn't wait. I got in the car and drove straight to Lafayette. When I peeked through the hospital room door, her eyes were open. "Hey there," I said softly. She smiled faintly. Is he okay?" "He's fine. He misses you." She nodded, then closed her eyes for a moment. "I was coming to get him," she whispered. "I know," I said. "I still want to. Just, not yet. Don't worry about that. You just focus on getting better." That night, When I got home, Scout was waiting on the porch. I sat beside him, and he laid his head on my knee. It was one of those rare moments when everything grief, hope, love, fear settled into one quiet beat. Over the next few weeks, Maggie remained in rehab. We talked every few days. She asked about Scout constantly, what he was eating, how he was sleeping, whether he was still visiting the school. I told her everything. How he'd discovered a love of ice cubes. How he'd taken to chasing the ceiling fan's shadow like a puppy. How the kids had made a banner with crooked glittery letters. "Welcome back, Scout." When I brought him in that morning, they squealed like he was a celebrity. Eli gave him a paper crown. Miss Connie pulled me aside, tears in her eyes. "He makes them feel safe," she said. "Like there's still something good here." "He's good for me too," I told her. By then, the Jenkins house had been sold. A young couple from Baton Rouge moved in, a teacher and a mechanic. They were bright-eyed and hopeful, planting wildflowers in the front yard. I helped one Saturday, shoveling earth and sipping lemonade. They asked about the dog. They'd heard rumors of the one who waited on the roof. I told them the story. They cried. Scout watched from the shade of the porch, tail tapping gently. Maggie returned for a visit the second weekend of April. She wasn't there to pick him up, just to see him. She was thinner, still sore, moving slowly, but her smile was steadier. They spent the afternoon in the backyard, walking the loop around the block, Scout nudging her hand with every few steps. Later, they sat in the grass, faces turned toward the sun. I watched from the kitchen window, a soft ache blooming in my chest. When she came back inside, she paused in the doorway. "I don't know if I can take him," she said quietly. "You don't have to decide right now, I mean ever." Looked at her. She was staring at Scout through the window. "I thought I wanted to," she said, voice low. "Maybe I still do, but then I see him here with you, with the school, with the town. He's happy, he's needed." She wiped at her eyes and gave a quiet laugh. "Every time I see him, he feels a little less like mine, like he's found something new. I'll always love him," she said. "But maybe, love isn't always about holding on." That night, I let Scout sleep in the bed with me again. He stretched out with a sigh and was asleep in minutes. I stared at the ceiling a long while. Outside, the marigolds we planted weeks ago had started to bloom bright. Defiant bursts of gold. Days grew warmer. Fireflies returned. The diner opened up outdoor seating, and Scout had his own water bowl beneath my regular table. The children rode bikes again. The post office reopened. Maggie kept visiting. Sometimes she brought cookies, sometimes nothing at all. She read stories at the school, taught the kids how to fold origami. She never missed a Friday. Every Friday morning, Scout waited by the gate until she came. They had their own little ritual, now a walk to the end of the block and back, then time beneath the sycamore tree, watching the clouds roll past like stories being written in the sky. One afternoon, a storm came in faster than expected. Thunder cracked while I was still in the kitchen. Rain sheeted down. Scout ran to the back door, whining. When I opened it, he bolted into the yard. Maggie was still out there, soaked to the bone, trying to pull down the clothesline before the wind snapped it. Scout ran to her, tail high. She dropped the rope and hugged him tight, laughing, her cheeks streaked with rain and tears. Later, wrapped in towels and sipping tea, she looked over at me. "He still knows when to come for me," she said. I met her gaze. "So do you." That weekend, we planted more marigolds. The kids had given us seedlings in yogurt containers, tiny offerings of life. Scout nosed the dirt, nearly tipped the wheelbarrow twice. Maggie laughed, her hands covered in soil. I saw the way she looked at him, not like someone reclaiming the past, but like someone watching a new story take root. That evening, I found her in the hallway, staring at the photo of Jack holding our first dog, Daisy. He was laughing like he'd won the lottery. "He looks like someone who loved deeply," she said. "He did," I answered. "And lost deeply, too." "But he's still smiling," she said. Because of her, Scout wandered in and nudged her hand. She smiled down at him. You saved him, she said. Then she looked at me. I think he saved me. That night, I slept better than I had in a long, long time. Scout took to summer like he was made for it. Every morning, he stretched out under the porch. His legs splayed like he was soaking up every drop of sunlight the floorboards would give. When the dew was still fresh on the grass, he wandered the yard, tail swishing gently as butterflies darted past. I left the back door open most days, and I'd find him sniffing around the wild mint by the fence, or lying belly down in the cool dirt near the marigolds we'd planted with the kids. Neighborhood began to heal in ways both big and small. The school let out for summer break. The kids left chalk drawings of Scout on the sidewalk, simple paw prints, bright suns, and wobbly hearts with his name scrawled inside. Fridays grew quieter. Scout still paced by the front gate every morning, ears perked at the sound of car engines, eyes flicking toward the road. But when no one came, he'd eventually lie down beside my rocker and doze through the heat. One Friday afternoon, just as I was considering what to make for lunch, there was a knock at the door. Maggie stood on the porch, a bright smile on her face and 2 canvas bags in hand. I figured he might miss the kids, she said, holding up a stack of laminated storybooks and a box of crayons. So I thought we'd try the retirement home. That's how it started. The next week, she called Sunny Pines and set up our first visit. Scout wore his best collar. I brushed his coat, wiped his paws, and packed a bag with treats and a collapsible water bowl. The moment we stepped through the front doors, the entire place seemed to brighten. The residents, most of them quiet, some nearly silent, lit up when they saw him. Scout walked slowly from room to room, resting his head in laps, allowing gentle fingers to comb through his fur. He moved like he understood the pace of the place. An elderly man told us he'd had a dog like Scout during the Korean War. A woman named Edna showed us a faded photo of her golden retriever from 1971 and insisted Scout stay beside her while she told him about her grandchildren. He listened. That's what he did best. By the end of the visit, the staff had made him a badger little laminated square with his name and a paw print sticker. They clipped it to his collar with pride. Ambassador, it read in shaky handwriting. Maggie smiled, but Scout just wagged his tail like none of it was a big deal. Fridays became his rounds. First the diner for bacon from Marlene, then the retirement home, sometimes the food pantry or the library. People started recognizing him. Children ran up to pet him. Volunteers left biscuits by the door. A fireman at the local station gave him a tiny red helmet that he wore for all of 10 seconds before sneezing it off. Maggie began writing again. She said she hadn't touched her notebooks in years. Now, every Sunday, she sat on the porch with a pen in hand and Scout curled at her feet. Some days she wrote about his ears twitching in his sleep. Other days, she wrote about the town, the people, the quiet healing that Scout seemed to carry with him. One morning, she read a short reflection aloud. It was just a few paragraphs, titled, "The Dog That Waited." Simple, soft, true. I clapped. When she finished, "You should submit that somewhere," I said. She shook her head. "It's just for me and him." Scout yawned, his legs twitching like he was chasing something in a dream. In July, Hollow Creek held its first community potluck. Since the flood, we set up folding tables in the town square. People brought pies, casseroles, baskets of cornbread. Someone strung fairy lights between the lampposts. There was laughter again. Music. That old hum of hope. Scout was the guest of honor. Someone made a sign that read, "Thank you, Scout, our hero." He wore a blue bandana. The children drew chalk paw prints around his spot by the desert table. Maggie organized a story circle where the kids shared their favorite memories of him. "My grandma says he's magic," one girl said. "She says he knows when people are sad." "He came to our class," a boy added, "and just looked at me. I felt better." An older woman from the retirement home stood and spoke softly. "He looked at me like I was still somebody," she said. "Like he saw me." By the end of the night, Scout lay stretched out beneath the table, snoring softly. I sat beside him, lemonade in hand. Maggie leaned against my shoulder. "Look what he built," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Summer drifted on. The heat peaked, then softened. The days began to shorten. Scout started sleeping longer. His steps were slower in the mornings. Maggie took on more hours at the library, helping with the kids' reading program. I noticed the way she spoke about him to strangers, the smile in her voice when someone asked, "Is that your dog?" She never said the word mine, but she didn't have to. One morning, in August, I woke early and noticed Scout wasn't at the foot of my bed. My heart jumped. I searched the hallway, the porch, the kitchen. Finally, I found him in the garden, lying among the marigolds, ears perked, eyes soft. Maggie was crouched beside him, brushing dirt from her hands. He wanted to come out here, she said. I nodded and sat beside her. The air was cool, almost autumn-like. He watched me plant these, she said, and now he guards them. That afternoon, we visited Sunny Pines again. Edna had made him a scarf from fabric scraps. He wore it proudly. Maggie read aloud from her notebook while Scout curled beside her. When she finished, the residents clapped, asking for more. Back in the car, she turned to me. Maybe I could write something bigger, she said. A story about him, about all of it. You should. She didn't reply right away. Then she said, I never would have healed without him. I thought the same thing, but I didn't say it. That night, she knocked on my bedroom door. She was holding her journal. Can I read you something? I nodded. She sat on the edge of the bed and read a passage called The Space Between. It was about loss and waiting, about quiet moments that stitch wounds closed, about a dog who didn't speak but said everything. When she finished, we sat in the hush. Maybe love isn't about taking someone back, she said. Maybe it's about seeing where they belong. Scout patted in, curled up at our feet, and sighed. The ceiling fan turned slowly above us. The house held its breath. Outside, the marigolds swayed gently in the night breeze. The first cool morning of September arrived quietly, like a whisper at the edge of dawn. The air carried a hush, something soft and expectant. Dew clung to the grass, and the breeze that moved through the trees brought with it a hint of wood and change. Scout stirred from his place on the porch, lifting his head slowly. He sniffed once, then sneezed softly and settled back down, his chin resting on the step, eyes half-lidded. He'd taken to watching the sunrise most mornings, as if it were a private ritual. Maggie joined him with a mug of coffee in one hand. Wrapped in the old flannel robe she'd found in a box at her parents' house. I followed them out with another cup. This morning feels like change, I said. She nodded, sipping slowly. Scout's been sniffing the air for 10 minutes. He knows something's coming. He always does. Scout flicked his ears at her voice, but didn't move otherwise. The town had settled into a rhythm again. School was back in session. The diner had its regulars, and most of the visible flood damage had been repaired. But the invisible things, the gaps, the absences, still lingered. Some neighbors hadn't returned. Some lots remained empty. Rain clouds still made people pause in doorways and glance nervously at gutters. Scout had become part of the way the town healed. Not just for the kids or the retirees, but for everyone, the cashier who cried in the stockroom, the librarian who smiled for the first time in months, the pastor who started keeping treats behind the pulpit. He made people feel like they weren't alone. Maggie began collecting their stories. She kept them in a folder on her laptop she called Sketstown. There were scanned photos, handwritten notes, emails, snapshots of Scout beside sandbags, asleep under bake sale tables, sitting still as a statue with a red balloon tied to his collar. One photo showed a little girl asleep on his back in a flower bed. Another, an elderly woman holding his face in both hands, eyes closed. We spent one Saturday afternoon sorting through them all. Maggie read each letter aloud. He stayed beside her for 2 hours while she napped. She read from one, didn't move a muscle like he knew. He did know, I said. The next time we returned to Sunny Pines, Edna was waiting at the door with a plate of sugar cookies and her walker. You missed your fans, she told Scout. Every day someone asked if the mayor was coming back. The mayor, Maggie asked. That's what we call him now. Everyone stops when he walks in. Scout sniffed the cookies and wagged his tail once. We were led into the common room, where chairs had already been arranged in a circle. The residents clapped when we entered. Scout made his rounds, greeting each person. Maggie passed out some of the photos. When she showed the one of Scout with Eli, she smiled. That's the boy who said Scout was better than people. Laughter rippled gently through the room. Maggie read one of her pieces aloud. When she finished, a woman named Phyllis clapped and said, "You should publish that. The world needs it." Maggie shrugged. "I'm just collecting pieces. I don't know what it is yet." "It's a blessing," Edna said. "That's what it is." On the way home, we stopped at the market. While Maggie ran in, I stayed in the car with Scout. A boy walked up to the window, 12, maybe 13. He glanced inside, shyly. "Is that the dog from the school?" he asked. I nodded. "That's him." The boy hesitated, then said, "He sat with my sister when she cried at recess. Didn't move until she stopped." He looked at Scout, who blinked at him. She got better after that. Then the boy turned and walked away. That night, Maggie added the story to her notebook. "He's changing people," she said, "and he doesn't even know it." As September faded, we began preparing for the harvest picnic, Hollow Creek's biggest event since the flood. The whole town chipped in. Maggie organized volunteers. I baked pies. Scout supervised. On the day of the picnic, the weather was perfect, sunny, breezy, not a hint of rain. Tables lined the park. Booths offered handmade goods and hot food. Children darted between games and hay bales. Scout wore his blue bandana, now adorned with small patches. Maggie had sewn symbols for the library, the school, the senior home. He moved through the crowd with ease. People greeted him like an old friend. One girl braided blades of grass into his tail. Another boy whispered into his ear. He lay beneath the desert table, content and observant. Maggie stood beside me, holding lemonade. "You think he knows why people love him? He probably thinks it's normal," I said. "He's always been like this." She watched him for a long moment. "I want to write it all down, not just the stories from others, ours too. How he waited, how he stayed." "You should. I don't know where to start." "Start at the roof," I said. That's where he began again. A week later, she handed me a manuscript. It wasn't bound, just pages in a folder. I read it that night. Every word. It was beautiful, honest, quiet, but powerful. The title sat at the top. The Dog Who Waited. "They'll love it," I told her. I was thinking, maybe I could include a little about you too. "I just paddled the canoe," I said. "You saw him first," she replied. October brought chilly mornings and golden leaves. Scout moved slower now. He curled tighter when he slept. We gave him a thicker blanket for the porch. One morning, I found him sitting beside the mailbox. Inside was a letter addressed to Maggie. She opened it slowly. A publisher had read the short version she'd submitted to a regional journal. They wanted to talk. They asked if she had more. "Do we?" she asked me. I looked at Scout, sniffing the porch edge like it was the most important job in the world. "Oh, we've got more." She spent the next 2 weeks revising. I helped where I could, dates, names, tiny memories she'd forgotten. Scout stayed near her desk, sometimes resting his chin on her foot. When she hit send, we ordered pizza and watched an old movie. Scout dozed between us on the couch, tail flicking at every music cue. Not long after, Edna arrived unexpectedly. She came in a cab. "I wanted to give him something before I forget," she said, and handed over a quilt. Tiny squares stitched with memory: Scout at church, Scout at school, Scout with her walker. He sniffed it, then curled up on top. "Thank you," she told him, "for helping me feel seen again." That night, Maggie opened her notebook and began writing again. Scout raised his head briefly, then rested it back down, watching the wind move through the trees. He was always watching, always listening, and always somehow exactly where he needed to be.